Welcome to our classes on mysticism. Today we're going to be discussing the main idea of the Rebbe's discourse of Basi Lagani that the Rebbe explained twice on Yud Shevat in the 6th chapter of Basi Lagani. As we're getting ready to celebrate Yud Shevat, as we know that is the day that the Rebbe's father-in-law passed away, and the day that the Rebbe took over leadership a year later. So there was a Chassidic discourse from the previous Rebbe that had 20 chapters to it, and the Rebbe every year would give an overview, but in depth he would take one of the chapters and go in depth into it. We are now in the cycle where we're studying the 6th chapter of that huge Chassidic discourse, and just to give a thought that the Rebbe explains about this discourse in relation to each and every one of us in our lives. And the Rebbe explains as follows. It's based on the verse that says that God came down to the garden. In other words, the Rebbe explains practically what that means is that originally when God created the world was full with God's presence. Godliness was all over. But what happened was, as mankind sinned against God, so God's presence on a spiritual level left this physical world, up to the point where this world was devoid from God and godliness. Until came along Avram Avinu, the first of the patriarchs, and he started to make God a reality in this world. So he started to hear about a blessing, thanking God, and Isaac and Jacob, until Moshe Rabbeinu, who Moshe Rabbeinu was the 7th of this chain of 7 righteous people that made God a reality in the world. So the world started to become back a godly place. Then Moshe Rabbeinu, by instruction of God, instructed us to make a Mishkan, and a Mishkan actually comes from the word shochen, to dwell, where God's presence will be able to dwell more in this world. Now, how did they make a Mishkan? So the Rebbe explains every single part of the Mishkan was part of making this world a godly place, physically, and more importantly, each and every one of us can make our world a spiritual godly place by learning lessons of the way the Mishkan was constructed. So one of the items in the Mishkan, the construction of the Mishkan, was something which is called Atzei Shittim, acacia wood. As we know that Jacob brought it into Egypt, they took it out to build the tabernacle. And the Rebbe explains what's the idea, why specifically acacia wood on a spiritual level? Because Shittim comes from the word of shtus. What does shtus mean? Shtus means, simple English, not rational. In other words, rational reality is that if someone's nice to you, you're nice back to them. So in other words, if God created this beautiful world and gave us our lives, gave us everything we have, so the rational thing, 1 + 1, is be nice to Him, recognize the God. He asks you to pray, study, do a mitzvah, behave the way a Jew should behave. Or the way someone that should be paying respect to God that put him in this world and gave him this beautiful world. So where does it come from that a person should go ahead and rebel against God? So the Rebbe explains it's not a rational thing. It's called a shtus, a silly thing. Now, how do you transform that silliness? You can't go and rationalize back to a good behavior. You have to be good irrationally. And just do good things just because. Go the extra step just because. So when a person does shtus, when a person does good things, positive things, happiness, just because, that transforms the sins that were caused by the shtus, by the silliness of doing the forbidden act. And there he brings many examples from the Talmud, etc. But to go deeper into it, the Rebbe explains, and this is the intensity of the 6th chapter, that the Atzei Shittim, which is basically the raw material. So what did the raw material make? They made actually a plank. What's a plank called in Hebrew? A plank is called a keresh. Now a keresh is a plank, and many planks created the wall. But the Rebbe says if you give a look at the word keresh, it's made up of 3 letters, a kuf, a resh, and a shin. And it's brought down in Zohar, in the Kabbalah, that a kuf and a resh, those 2 letters come from not the side of Kedusha, it comes from the opposite of Kedusha, it comes from the world of Klippa, where godliness is not necessarily so prevalent. Now, the reality is, we know that if you want to go ahead and say an untruth or a lie or just deal with the negativity, no one's going to buy it. No one's going to get involved. So Kabbalah says that the Kuf and the Reish took a partner with them, the Shin, because Shin comes from the word of the truth, Kushta truth, and they brought it together, and with that they made the Keresh. In other words, so our job in the Mishkan is to take the Kuf and the Reish, which is the opposite of holiness, and by bringing it together with the Shin and planting it into the Keresh, into the Mishkan, we're able to transform the Kuf and the Reish. So how do we go about doing that? So the Rebbe explains, what's the counterpart of the Kuf? The counterpart of the Kuf, the letter Kuf, is the letter Hey. What's the counterpart of the letter Reish? Is the letter Dalet. In other words, if you give a look, what's the difference between the letter Reish and the letter Dalet? So there's two differences. One is in the design. The Reish has one design. The Dalet has, it's a pretty similar, but the difference is the Dalet has a little Yud on top. And also in the translation. So Reish comes from the word of Rash, which someone's poor, and Dalet comes from the word of Dalis, someone that's also very, very poor. What's the difference between someone that's poor in the world of Klipa, the opposite of holiness, and someone that's poor in the world of holiness? The Rebbe explains very, very simple. When a person is poor, when he doesn't have something, opposite of holiness, it's built and based on arrogance. And that's why, whatever it may be, it's not a holy thing. Because Kedusha, on the other hand, the Dalet, it comes from the idea of humility. In other words, our job is not to be the Reish, where we're arrogant, God forbid, but our job is to be poor in a holy way. So what does it mean to be poor in a holy way? So the Rebbe explains, if you give a look in the Sfirot, the 10 Sfirot, so you have Chachma, Bina, Das, the 3 intellectual Sfirot, which are obviously rich Sfirot, intellect. You have the emotions, Chesed, Gvur, Perez, Netzach, Hod, Yisod, which are the emotional Sfirot, there's 7, but 6. And then you have Malchus, which is basically empty. So Malchus on one hand has nothing. The only thing Malchus is, it receives the 3 intellectuals and the 6 emotionals, and it receives something which is not his. Now, how can Malchus receive all that if it has nothing? So the power that Malchus has is that Malchus is truly humble. And by being truly humble, by being a vessel, it's able to have everything in there. Not only does it able to receive everything in there, all the intellectual capacities, all the emotional capacities, but Malchus goes on to being a leader to the next world and to the next person. And as we know, Malchus spiritually is referring to peh, our mouth. In other words, what's our mouth? Our mouth is it's just a mouth. It's a mouthpiece. Depending on what you study, depending on what you meditate, depending on you feel, that's what comes out and gets delivered to your mouth. So if your mouth is humble, if your mouth just talks what it wants to talk, it's not necessarily going to say the most smartest things, but if it's humble and allows itself to accept from the mind something thought out and from the emotions, then it's able to deliver something meaningful and beautiful. So in other words, what is ultimately the job of the Jew? To take from the Keresh, take from the Reish, which is Klipa, to transform it with the Dalet, with humility, and this way we're able to make a Mishkan into this world. So the key, what's the key difference? The key difference is that our avoda is to create within us true humility. And when we're able to be humble, we'll be able to receive all the blessings. And once we'll be able to receive all the blessings, then we'll be able to share all the blessings with other people. So in other words, the Rebbe explains in this theme of humility that a person has to think, why was he created? And we know there's a famous verse that says, Ani livresi l'shamash eskoini. God created me to serve God. In other words, to be a vehicle to deliver God's message. And as long as I'm cognizant, subconsciously and more important consciously, that I am here to serve God, I'll be able to be a true vessel and a true vehicle to deliver God's message to the world. And I think the Rebbe's message of Yud Shvat to each and every one of us is, by us being humble and realizing that our purpose in this world is to be ani nevresi l'shamas eskoini, to serve God with proper humility, we'll be able to receive all the powerful blessings from God and to be able to disseminate God's message to the world, and we'll be able to make this world a place where God is felt in every single place and in every single person. Thanks so much for joining us for our mystical teaching on the Rebbe's teaching of Basi Lagani. For future classes at Chabad, please see our website.